Philly Startup Leaders presents Founder Factory 2015. This program was recorded January 13th, 2015 at The Hub at Cirrus Center in Philadelphia. This year's Founder Factory is brought to you by these sponsors: Broadpath, the Innovation Center at 3401, Startup PHL, and Morgan Lewis. In Video 6, a presentation by Bob Moore, co-founder and CEO of RJMetrics.
Just really quickly explain what RJMetrics is, because it can certainly be slightly confusing in the universe of data companies that's out there. We're a business that's based right here in Center City. We're at about 100 people right now, and our mission as a company is to inspire and empower data-driven people. And we do that by building a piece of software that basically enables online businesses to use their data to make smarter decisions. We consolidate data from various data sources, your backend databases, Google Analytics, other third-party tools, and then give you a cloud-based data warehouse where that all lives, and a really great front-end interface for going in, asking questions of that data, and gaining insights around how to spend your marketing dollars more efficiently, how to better develop your product or your merchandising process. Really, any number of strategic business decisions that kind of take a long-term view of your company, and more tactical things on a day-to-day basis about just how things are going and reporting. So my presentation today is not really about RJMetrics, the product, at all. We have grown a lot in our history through very, very organic means. And I think along the way, we found a couple of things that have worked. And I think Apu and I didn't plan this, but I think our presentations will dovetail together quite well. Basically, on a very, very shoestring budget initially, and then over the long term, figuring out how to scale it as we've been able to raise venture capital, figuring out these special tactics within the universe of inbound marketing that really enable us to grow our business at a pretty good clip, and also scale when the base gets bigger and bigger. So everything that I talk about today lives inside this universe of list building. And when you think about, well, what might you want to build a list of? The answer is, when you are building lists, you are building a list of anyone who might ever give you their money in the future. Period. And you can break that down into some subcategories, but really, at the end of the day, your interest is in understanding who these people are. And interestingly, for most companies, customers are one of the most powerful and contributory sources of revenue tomorrow. So people that have spent money with you in the past are a very obvious list. It's a list that's easy to get because you probably have their contact information already. As you get farther away from a sale that's completed, you go into this universe of prospects, and these are people that have probably interacted with your brand in some way. These are people that have demonstrated some interest in what your company does or what you're offering. And then you get into this really, really interesting category, and this is what I'm going to spend most of the time on today. You get into strangers. And how I define strangers is basically everybody who's not a customer or a prospect is a stranger. And the most market opportunity for you will always exist in the universe of turning more strangers into prospects and turning those prospects into customers. And then it's a very, very virtuous cycle, because the people in those second two categories keep coming back, particularly if you're a software as a service or recurring revenue business, and spending more with you. So when you think about these categories, there's this metric that I really like to use called the Reciprocity Index. Has anybody heard of this before? Probably not, because I made it up. But I think it's actually a super interesting framework to kind of give you a sense of what your relationship is like with each of the people in each one of these categories. So if you think about it with your customers, Reciprocity Index is really straightforward. The value that you deliver to them is your product or your merchandise or your service, whatever they're paying you for. And then the value that they receive in response, the value that you receive is just the money that they are paying you. So really, if your reciprocity index is above 1 for your customers, they stay customers, they buy more. If it's below 1, they're going to churn. And that's a really simple dynamic. It starts to get a little more nuanced as you go over into your prospects and you think about what that relationship is like. Because when they're a prospect, the value that you receive is not actually money yet. It's a probability-weighted likelihood of getting money in the future. It's some sense of the value of an opportunity when you consider that some prospects are going to pan out and some are not. And then the value that you deliver is also very nuanced because what they want is information. They want that dopamine rush associated with knowing that there's something out there that's going to solve the pain they're feeling today, or make them a hero within their organization, or kind of move the ball forward in the way that's meaningful for them. So then what does the reciprocity index look like for strangers? It is a very, very interesting question because the value that they receive might not even be something that they are actively looking for. A stranger might not be thinking about your business, might not be feeling a pain, might be out there spending their day consuming social media or doing their job in some completely different way. So the value that you can deliver needs to be something that is not necessarily tied directly to your business. It can be something that really gets their attention and delivers value that's not necessarily something that's going to initiate a sales process deep down in the funnel, but it's actually way, way, way up at the top. So what I want to do today is break down this talk into 2 sections. One is content marketing for the long tail, and one is content marketing for everybody else, for the masses. And I want to talk about some things that we've done at RJMetrics that I think have worked pretty well over the long run here. So most of you are probably familiar with the concept of the long tail, but it is this. If you've taken a calculus class, the general idea here is that, and if you think about this in terms of the universe of keywords, it's actually a pretty helpful framework, although the long tail kind of exists in pretty much everything. In the universe of keywords, there are a small number of keywords that demand a very, very high amount of search traffic. A lot of people are interested in them. They're generating a lot of volume. And then there are an enormous universe of keywords that are generating a much smaller amount of traffic. Now, this starts to come into play in the context of running my business, particularly when we were bootstrapped, because of things like this. Now, for us, the biggest non-long tail keyword at RJMetrics, the thing that sits in the green here, is business intelligence. And this is what happens when you Google the term business intelligence. Does anybody see anything interesting about this search results page above the fold? Anybody? There is not a single organic search result on this page. Every single thing that you see here is either automatically generated by Google or it is an ad that Google is being paid for. And what this means is that if I am the best SEO guru out there, if I'm able to build amazing content and I can beat out Oracle and SAP and Microsoft and be the #1 result for business intelligence, I will still not be on the front page above the fold when someone searches for it on Google. And this is why. Because it costs $65.61 to buy a single click for the term business intelligence. And in the early days of RJMetrics, and hell, even today, we are battling Oracle for that click. So, even if you're banked and you have, a venture backing, if you're going up against somebody with $24 billion worth of cash assets sitting on their balance sheet, you just cannot compete in this universe. So the question naturally arises, what do you do instead? So this is where the long tail starts to come in. We started thinking as a company, what is it that the people who might buy our software, the people that are feeling that pain, are actually looking for? Not a lot of people that start companies even know what business intelligence is when they start out. Not a lot of people even appreciate the nuance of that being a software category, or that RJMetrics would even fall into it. What they know is that they are trying to reduce their churn rate. They are trying to understand what their customers are worth. They're trying to grow faster. They're trying to run an A/B test. They're trying to join 2 SQL tables together. All of these things are searches that our potential customers might be doing that we knew would be relevant. So we started out on this process to try and put together a list of as many of these long tail keywords as we possibly could. And for us, it was relatively easy because we feel these pains in growing our own business. And being able to kind of put ourselves in our customers' shoes, we were able to build up a list of over 100 keywords that kind of were variations on this theme. And if you use the Google Keyword Builder tool, not only can you see what kind of search volume is behind those terms, you can also see how much money you would have to spend to just buy the click anyway. And it's really easy to do some math relatively quickly to see where you can actually capture the most value by creating something that's going to be a very high organically ranking search result. I put some level of confidence in the fact that the Google search market is somewhat efficient. Not perfectly efficient, but somewhat efficient, meaning that the quality of clicks for a higher bid keyword is going to be something that is going to yield a higher quality visitor. So we've been able to go through this process and get these numbers and then check what the actual search results are for all of these terms and look at what is the page rank of the #1 result, of the #2 result. What's the quality of content, even if you don't want to use the SEO trick of the week, over the long term, just having a philosophy of, if we generate the best content and we do a good job of promoting it, we will become the #1 result as a result of that. And if the content sucks in the #1 spot, then there's a tremendous opportunity there. So what we started out doing was building blog posts. So we identified churn rate as an opportunity for us to kind of break into the top results. We wrote some blog posts over time that related to churn rate. But the thing that kept happening was, with these long tail keywords, we always wanted to do more. There might have been some kind of an online tool that you interacted with that gave you some kind of calculation that just wasn't well suited for a blog post. We wanted content that was much more evergreen. So when you have a blog post, that blog post has a date. Google is very aware of the fact that this is a content that is dated after a certain period of time. We wanted to cultivate something that was much more likely to still be there and still rank in a year or two. So we started venturing into this universe of microsites. We've got a handful of sites in this universe, and I'm going to go through some of them, but churn-rate.com is this one for us. And I just want to use this as a case study. What we've been able to do here is take the same content that we have in one of these blog posts, slightly fitted to be a little more generic in the definition of what churn rate is, et cetera, and put together a website with a very minimal amount of investment, a very, something our graphic designer did in 10 minutes as an animation to put on the front, and get ourselves up to the point where we're #3 on the organic list for churn rate, and also the only actual business that's there in the top 3. That's actually driving people toward some kind of call to action. So this is the traffic for churn rate since we put it online, which has grown up to about 5,000 monthly visitors, that if we were to buy this traffic, we'd be paying about $11.05 per click. So if you extrapolate that out to the year, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of costs that we're organically generating. You might say this is it's a isolated case, but for us, you've got to think about what this funnel actually means and what this traffic actually translates to. So I will go into some numbers here that I may have them take out of the YouTube thing publicly. So this is a Cirrus Center Hub crowd special for you. So just a sample breakdown here of what this kind of microsite can represent for a business that's at this stage. So if you get to 5,000 views that are coming in on a monthly basis, those 60,000 views per year, say you've got a really crappy rate of getting those views into some kind of sales qualified lead. That's what SQL means in this case. That means that sales has had some conversation with them, initially qualified them as a realistic prospect. That's giving you 60 SQLs on an annual basis. And then for us, about 20% of our sales qualified leads end up becoming paying customers. Our paying customers pay us about $1,000 a month on average, so that's a 12K ACV. That's $132,000 worth of new ARR. And if you're in a business where this is working and you have these scalable channels, then what determines your valuation in a venture round is as much about your absolute scale as it is about your growth rate. And this number may seem absolutely insane to you, but if you're growing fast enough, it's not out of the ordinary to see a 10x or a 15x multiple on your recurring revenue when a valuation gets placed on your company. So that means that 15x on that $132,000 of new ARR is $2 million of equity value added to the company when a venture round gets done. $2 million for one microsite built in one day. CohortAnalysis.com is another one that we've built. We're the #1 result for cohort analysis. CustomerLifetimeValue.co, we're climbing up the charts there. That's a relatively recently built one. QueryMongo, which is something where you can put in a SQL query and it'll spit out the MongoDB equivalent of that query. We had to build this technology in order to build RJMetrics because we do a lot of work with Mongo. So we just took this small slice of technology and exposed it to the public to generate this page, and we're actually now, this ranks for a ton of different terms related to Mongo, but the coolest one is query translator, which is a really, really popular term. We're the #1 and the #2 result for that somehow. So really, I like to think about this as a portfolio approach when you're dealing with the long tail. We do these microsites, but they are part of a broader effort. So that collateral that you put together, that investment that you make in the microsite kind of serves as a landing page. It's got really good calls to action on it after that information comes through, but you can repurpose that content, break it down into blog posts, host webinars that are based on that information, and bring in guests that you can do co-marketing with on that topic. You can build out white papers, you can build out landing pages that are targeted at other but related keyword terms. You can basically systematize the use of this content in such a way that it ends up bringing more and more traffic into your universe. That translates into leads, that translates into building those lists that I was talking about. So that's microsites. I want to talk about content marketing for the masses now, which to me is super fun. I think, so Apu talked about the merits of PR, and I agree with everything that he said. We have a slightly different approach in that we don't have a PR firm. And from our very earliest days, we have been managing our PR internally, and it's all been in service of answering kind of this really, really interesting question, which is when the world is your audience, who is that competition? So if you're really at the head of the distribution there, and you're looking at these keyword terms or these eyeballs that really exist in mass, are you really competing with the same person that you're competing with when you get into a head-to-head sales competition? Not really. Are you really competing with, your neighbor in your incubator who might be, competing with you for space or resources or hires? No, not really. You are competing with everybody else that is in the content world. So your real competition that you're going up against is like articles about cats that love Halloween costumes, like adorable, adorable things that other people can spend their time doing. And it forces you to ask this really big question about how do we win in that landscape where we're actually competing with effectively the rest of the content world. And it forces you to say what we said about ourselves, which is RJMetrics generally, the truth of the matter is that to the average person out there, we are not a sexy company and we will never be one. Someone will not come to our website and visit rjmetrics.com because they really think that we're the coolest thing in the world. Some people in the data universe might have that feeling, but the vast majority, the 99.9999% of the world, is going to care much more about other things. And by admitting that fact, it's a very, very empowering thing because it forces you to go in and make yourself part of a bigger story. In 2009, we barely had a product yet. And Twitter was this media darling, much like Apu was talking about Pinterest earlier, kind of having its moment in the sun. In 2009, this was like Twitter's moment in the sun. It was really big. And they released an API where you could go and retrieve information about Twitter users, et cetera. But they had never really released any data about themselves or said too much other than an absolute user count. But at this moment in time, and it's not true anymore, the user IDs of Twitter users were auto-incrementing integers. So, BizStone was 1 and Evan Williams was 2, and you could kind of go to their API and say, give me 1, 2, 3, 4, blah, 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 5 million, and basically download Twitter's entire backend database. And what we were able to do is we had this tool, RJMetrics, that was really good at analyzing data that was in a database, and we pulled the data out of Twitter's API, put it into RJMetrics, and answered a bunch of really, really interesting questions about Twitter at that moment. How loyal are their users? What's the typical distribution of how many followers they have? How often do people tweet? Who are the most popular people with the most followers, et cetera? It was an absolute goldmine of information that at this moment in time, everybody was really, really scrambling for. So we pulled all this data out and we wrote it as a post for our own blog. And on a whim, the night before we ran it, and at this point we have zero media context whatsoever. I emailed tips@techcrunch.com. And I attached the article as a PDF and I said, hey, we're gonna run this first thing tomorrow morning. Just want to give you guys a jump on it in case maybe you want to wanted to do some coverage. And within 5 minutes, Eric Schoenfeld, who was the editor at that time, emailed me back and said, we want to run this front and center first thing tomorrow morning. Can you do this for us as a guest post? And that started a very long and prosperous relationship between us and TechCrunch, where we can do these data-driven types of articles and actually yield a really, really fantastic return in terms of views and shares and traffic that makes its way back to our website. We've done a lot of these. We've done some stuff on Pinterest for sure. Instagram, when it was really big, was there. Back, I don't know if anybody remembers Chatroulette when that was really big, but like we did Mechanical Turk is great for this stuff. So we just created a Mechanical Turk task that said, hey, go log on to Chatroulette and fill out this survey about the first person that you encounter. And we got all this data about the distribution of what people were doing on Chatroulette, and Tosh.0 covered it and made fun of me really badly, which was a highlight of my career. We did this with Meetup. Most recently this year, we did the Ice Bucket Challenge earlier this year, which was really interesting to look at. But really, what's amazing, and being opportunistic really plays into this well, it's like, our #1 performing post from last year, the thing that blew everything else out of the water, that was #1 on Hacker News, went to the top on Reddit, was just like sending 6 figures worth of page views traffic to our blog, was an article about how we released a new logo that looked like a pair of underpants by accident. This is like an introspective piece that basically said, hey, we released this new RJMetrics dodecahedron logo. When you looked at it at a certain angle, certain people just saw orange underpants. And we had this moment where it was like, well, we now are one of those companies that has like the underpants logo, and we could have kind of scrambled and replaced it and whatnot, but we decided, embracing this and telling the story of it as a case study was something that might really resonate with people. And it absolutely did. This really, on a lot of dimensions, drove just an enormous amount of traffic to our site. It also created this great multiplying effect against our PR strategy more generally. Among other things, including various speaking gigs and whatnot, not only did we get an article in the New York Times about this, I got a blog on the New York Times because of the post. So I've now got on the You're the Boss blog on the New York Times, I've published about 15 articles about data and honesty and entrepreneurship. It would not have existed if not for the underpants logo. And I think that is a very, very strange example of how being opportunistic can really, really play to your favor. I know a lot of people say, that's not fair, this strategy works really well for RJMetrics because you are a data company. So you can pull data and then you put it in your tool and you're showcasing your tool. I really want to highlight the fact that this is something that every company can do. Finding a way that whatever you offer can become part of the narrative of a bigger story is absolutely something that is possible. If you think it's not possible, come and find me, and challenge accepted. We can talk through it and come up with some ideas. The things that I was saying about Mechanical Turk and using tools that are way outside the universe of RJMetrics specifically, most of our data-driven content doesn't even rely on RJMetrics in any way to get put together. But we're talking about data, and we're cultivating a reputation as being thought leaders in this space. And when you do that, each incremental thing kind of snowballs, and you get a little more attention and respect. I wanted to spend kind of the last 5 minutes here just talking about the methodology of PR hacking, that's what we call this, can definitely be a controversial one. And one of the things we did last year was put together kind of a code of conduct for PR hacking that I think is really important to know and understand if you're going to be playing in that game. So we've got just a handful of rules here that we follow when we're doing this that I think keep us on the right track and make this really successful and attractive to journalists. One is definitely using a transparent, repeatable methodology. I totally, when Apu was saying that the journalists never check the numbers, he's totally right. That's absolutely true. It's amazing how little validation can often happen on a data set before a major news outlet will pick it up. But what's important is that once you get down into the comments section, or once that day comes when somebody really does challenge it, you have a good answer. I think this is from the comments of either that original Twitter post or something else where, there's some commenter comes in and wants to talk smack about the central limit theorem, and it's extremely important that there's actually an articulate response to that that makes sense and can cause this person to say, cool, thanks for replying and for the analysis, and not, hey, this is a complete bunch of crap. You've got to know how you did what you did and be confident in the fact that if someone else did that same exact experiment on their own, they would come up with the same results again. Another one here is just not hiding your identity. It can be really tempting when you're doing things that's pulling from APIs or scraping websites to, you can fake your HTTP agent and pretend that you're somebody else, or, you can make a bunch of fake accounts. It really, to me, this is a violation of Warren Buffett's newspaper test. Like, if it came out on the front page of a popular national newspaper tomorrow that you or your company did this, is that something that you would be proud of? And the irony here is that if you're successful in what you're doing, that's exactly what you want. You want to be on the front page of a big national newspaper. And it means a lot that your company's acting in such a way that you can actually do this and hold your head high. And related to that is not dragging companies into the limelight. If there's a startup that we have an opportunity to get some data on, even if it's got a founder that is super popular, but they're maybe being really stealthy right now, or they're not attracting press, or they're not doing interviews, we will not do that story. The companies that we look at are the companies that are way out in the press, that are going out there and basically trading on mentions and popularity to grow. And I think in that situation, you're in a situation where you feel much more comfortable about becoming a part of that conversation and enriching it with new data. And my example here is just like, the most blatant example is this company that we did a profile of before. I don't know if people have ever seen these stupid lawn signs hanging around, but somebody put this lawn sign literally in my front yard. And it's like, if you're putting a lawn sign in my front yard, you are asking to be scrutinized a little bit. And I think that it's stuff like that I think it kind of passes the test. And yeah, I would definitely check out that blog post. So we also like to just let people know in advance. I'll talk in a second about an example related to Google+, but around the time a year or two ago when we were having a lot of success with these things, we started noticing that we would pitch the story to Business Week or to somebody else, and they'd end up running the story, and they'd get a quote from the company themselves. It never is anybody invalidating the data, but they might have a nuanced explanation for it, or they might want to add a comment. So to us, that's an opportunity for us to just get that comment directly and have it in our primary source of content. So if we want to be the top result for Pinterest data or Instagram data or Twitter data, that is going to get more and more inbound links if it's a balanced story that's got quotes from the actual company. So we've actually found that reaching out to the companies can be really helpful. Not only does it provide some validation, but also helps us make sure that the data's right and that they actually agree with it. And that really feeds into just generally providing a balanced narrative. When we did a story about Google Plus a little while ago, this is the most well-balanced headline that we could put together. Was new Google Plus data shows weak user engagement. Something that was definitely verifiable and accurate based on the data that we had, as tempting as it was to build a more BuzzFeed-like headline. Within 24 hours of us publishing that, this is what shows up all over the internet. So you've got, Google's in total denial about this huge problem with Google Plus, and is it a ghost town? And Google's still not as interesting as Pinterest. I don't even think we mentioned Pinterest in the study. People just wanted to talk about Pinterest. These things are like the journalists will run with it, and you don't need to drag yourself through the mud in doing that. Kind of allowing people to paint the story that's going to get the eyeballs and the inbound links to you is really what's valuable. And also, we just kind of tend to wrap up with, what would a journalist do? And I think that there's, the definition of journalist on the web has gotten looser and looser and looser, but pick the journalist that you admire the most and kind of ask the question, what's the level of integrity that person would have around conducting a story like this, telling a story, collecting the data. And I think if you follow that as your guideline, then you're going to be successful, and you'll also be able to sleep at night, and hopefully you will build some really awesome lists. So cool, thanks. That's all I got. Questions? Do we have a? Yeah.
Yeah. How do you get people from the Microsites to RJMetrics?
Great. So the microsites, we use Pardot, which is a marketing automation tool. There are a lot of them out there. Apu just mentioned HubSpot, which is a great one. Marketo is in this universe. Act on Software is another popular one. These tools are basically a repository for your leads at every stage of the funnel. So for us, Pardot is there's a tag that we will install on every microsite, that's on every blog post, that's on our own homepage, that's on any of our video assets or other third-party assets, all of our landing pages, that has a cookie and is basically following people all over the place that are interacting with our assets in one way or another. So when someone lands on one of our microsites, if they have ever filled out a form anywhere before, whether it's our demo, another microsite, the white paper page, etc., we will know immediately that this is that person. And if a sales rep is working the deal, they'll become aware of the fact that they're now interacting with this asset. If we've never seen that person before, we have some call to action at the end of these pages. So if it's something about churn rate, it might be access to a churn rate white paper, or access to a webinar that we have coming up that's about churn rate, or some other piece of collateral. If it's about cohort analysis, we just funnel people directly into the RJMetrics demo, because you can go in there and play around with our cohort analysis builder, which is really easy to interact with and kind of get exactly what you're driving at. So it kind of depends on the asset, but there's some landing page call to action set up there that gets people in. And then once they fill out that form, interactivity with all the other assets is wired together. Cool. Yeah. Yeah, the question is, who was in charge of producing the content when we first started, and has that changed? In the early days, it was me, and I still am involved in the content organization. It's rare that I will be doing this kind of PR hacking stuff. We now have a growth engineering team, which is one or two people that sit on the marketing team that have some development chops, and a content marketing team, which is one or two writers that are responsible for actually generating our blog posts, other assets, and the editorial associated with that data analysis. It was a long time before 1 year ago today, my answer probably still would have been me. I think that our marketing team has evolved and grown a lot over time, but for a while, our marketing team was a pretty small cell. But I think that's a great example of where founder DNA is going to be very influential to what pieces of the organization get built up first and in what ways. So I think even up until last year, it was still a very high leverage use of my time to spend a day or a half of a day cultivating one of these pieces of content and making it work due to the economics that I showed before. And it was very difficult to hire against that, because hiring engineering talent is really difficult. Deploying that against marketing is very difficult to do when you have major product investments to make and things like that. So it really took getting to a point of maturity for us to break that cycle of just having the founder do it. But eventually we got there. Cool, I think we're out of time. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
We hope you enjoyed this program. For more information on Founder Factory and the Philly Startup Leaders, visit phillystartup.leaders.org. We produce this program in the studios of the Lubetkin Media Companies in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, on the web at beingthemedia.com. For everyone at Philly Startup Leaders and the Lubetkin Media Companies, this is Steve Lubetkin. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you out there on the net. Take good care.